The cafe smelled like cinnamon and burnt espresso. That familiar hum of small talk and clinking cups wrapping around me like a warm blanket I didn't quite deserve. I'd come early, as always, thinking this brunch would be a celebration, one final family moment before Emily's big day. I'd even wrapped a small velvet box with her grandmother's pendant inside. Something old, something loved. When she finally walked in, radiant and flushed from the October air, I felt that ache only mothers and aunts understand, pride mixed with a pinch of loneliness. She hugged me lightly, sat down, and ordered her usual oat milk latte. No excitement, no glow of a bride-to-be, just calm. "So," I asked, stirring my coffee, "when's the big day?" Her spoon paused midair. A flicker of guilt crossed her face before she forced a smile. "Oh, we actually got married yesterday, Aunt Maggie." For a second, I thought she was joking, but then she looked away. Every sound in the cafe went dull. The hiss of milk frothing, the chatter, even the rain on the window. I could see my reflection in the glass. Steady hands, polite smile, eyes that didn't match either $2 latte, $200 haircut, 20 years of showing up, and somehow I still wasn't worth a text. I smiled, the way you do when a knife slips and you pretend it didn't. "That's wonderful, sweetheart. I'm happy for you." She exhaled, relieved, not noticing the tremor in my hand as I reached for my cup. I nodded through her small talk, her apologies wrapped in laughter, her plans for a honeymoon I wasn't meant to know about. Inside, something familiar stirred. That cold, quiet place I built in childhood every time I was told, "Don't make it about you, Maggie." This time, I let the silence stretch. I watched the rain trail down the glass and thought of all the times I'd swallowed disappointment until it soured into peace. It wasn't the first time my family celebrated without me, I thought, fingers brushing the old fountain pen in my bag, but it was the first time I stopped pretending it didn't hurt. I rose from my chair, slipped a tip under the cup, and smiled one last time. "I stopped being afraid a long time ago," I whispered. But that day, I stopped being silent too. The year smelled like cut grass and gasoline. Daniel stood in the driveway, his grin wide as our father handed him the keys to a shiny blue Honda Civic, a graduation gift for all his hard work. I remember clapping, smiling, pretending it didn't sting. I'd graduated a year earlier. My gift had been a hug and a home-cooked meal, mashed potatoes, roast beef, and the reminder that money's tight right now, sweetheart. Later that night, I found the sales slip in the trash, $2,600. My father never liked lying, but he liked Daniel's smile more than the truth. I folded the receipt, put it in my notebook, and told myself it didn't matter. But it did. It always did. I won a design scholarship, full tuition for a summer program in Chicago. I came home beaming, holding the acceptance letter like proof that I was finally visible. Mom glanced at it and sighed. "Don't make your brother feel bad, Maggie. You know he's still trying to get into community college." I laughed it off, told her it was fine. I didn't go to Chicago. Instead, I stayed home that summer, waitressing at the diner to help cover Daniel's tuition deposit. He dropped out 2 months later. By 2000, our father was gone. The will was short, 2 pages handwritten. All property, assets, and accounts to remain in Daniel Holt's capable hands. Capable. That word echoed for months. Mom said, "You've got your own path, honey. You don't need things to prove your worth." But worth, I learned, is a slippery thing when you're raised to earn it from people who can't give it. When I tried to confront Daniel about it, he smiled, that same easy grin he used on everyone. "You're not really a money person, Mags," he said, handing me a stack of his unpaid bills. "You're more about passion. Passion didn't pay rent. Passion didn't fix broken promises." A few weeks later, I found out he'd borrowed my $8,000 college savings, a small inheritance from Grandma, meant for my architecture license. He used it to invest in a printing startup. The business folded before it printed its first page. That night, I packed my things. The only thing I took that wasn't mine was my father's old fountain pen, black lacquer, gold nib, still half full of dried ink. I'd watched him sign every important paper with it. Somehow, it felt like the only part of him that believed in me. I moved into a basement apartment above a laundromat, working freelance drafting jobs on a folding table that wobbled every time the spin cycle started. My first client paid me $600. I bought a cheap desk, refilled that old pen, and swore to myself I'd never ask my family for anything again. There were years when I almost broke that promise. Birthdays I spent alone, calls I didn't return, Christmas cards unopened. But every time I reached for the phone, I'd feel that pen in my hand and remember. They only called when they needed something. I learned to build walls. Then I learned to design them for a living. 25 years later, I sat in a sunlit conference room overlooking downtown Portland, the skyline sharp against the river. My name, Margaret Holt, lead architect, was embossed on the contract in front of me. $12.4 million, sustainable housing, my firm's biggest project yet. Gina popped the champagne the moment the signatures dried. From a basement to the city skyline, she said, grinning. I laughed, holding up my glass. Built from nothing, with no one, and proud of it. That night I posted the photo. Me holding the pen against the contract. Caption, built from nothing with no one, and proud of it. By morning, 40,000 likes. Hundreds of congratulations. Then one message that made my chest tighten. Daniel Holt, proud of you, sis. Let's catch up soon. My finger hovered over the screen. I didn't reply. It always starts this way. Morning sunlight spilled through the floor-to-ceiling windows of my home. Glass, cedar, and steel nestled against the Oregon hillside. Every inch of it was a promise I'd kept to myself. A $2.1 million eco-home that breathed with the earth, powered by the sun, and quiet in all the right ways. My sanctuary. The Tesla sat in the driveway, gleaming like a silver whisper of everything I'd built. Some people buy fast cars to show off. I bought mine because it didn't need gas, or anyone's permission to move forward. Workdays started early now. The firm had grown into a team of 16, spread across 2 cities. Our last project grossed $9.7 million, renewable housing that turned city waste into clean energy. I loved every number, not for what it bought me, but for what it proved. I could build more than walls. I could build worth. That night, Gina threw a dinner at the office to celebrate the award. There were candles, laughter, a long wooden table we designed ourselves. She tapped her glass and smiled. To the woman who built her own damn family. Everyone raised a glass. Blood makes you related, I said, smiling at the faces that had stayed when others didn't. But love makes you family. Applause. Cheers. And in the quiet between toasts, I caught myself looking at my phone, an old reflex, expecting a text that never came. Later, when the dishes were cleared and laughter had faded, the message appeared, Mom's not doing well. We need you home. The words glowed on the screen, familiar as a bruise. I sat there for a long time, the taste of champagne going flat on my tongue. The message wasn't from my mother. It was from Daniel. Of course it was. Every time they needed something, suddenly family mattered again. I typed a single reply. How bad is it? He answered almost instantly. She's tired, stressed, and we're all worried. Maybe we could talk in person. I stared at the screen until it dimmed. Boundaries weren't walls. They were doors that stayed closed until someone earned the key. But Daniel had always assumed he owned one. I locked my phone, turned off the lights, and walked to bed. The old fountain pen sat on my nightstand. My father's pen. My reminder. I'd learned long ago that signatures meant more than apologies. The next morning, my phone rang. His voice hadn't changed. The same easy drawl, practiced charm. Em's married now, he said. We did a small thing. You know, she wanted it low-key. The words hit like cold air. Married, low-key, no call. No invite. Just another decision made behind my back. I kept my tone light. That's wonderful. Congratulations. He chuckled, then cleared his throat. We're trying to buy them a place, but the bank's short about $180,000. You could help, right? Just until we sell Mom's old property. I stared at the river outside my office window. Calm, relentless, unstoppable. Daniel, I said softly, I'd love to talk. In person. A pause. Sure, that'd be great. He didn't know it yet, but this time I had receipts. The rain came in sideways that afternoon, the kind that rattled windows and made every mile of the drive feel like a test. The wipers beat their steady rhythm as I turned down the gravel road toward the farmhouse. The same one where my father used to oil his tools on Sunday afternoons. Where Daniel once chased me through the orchard with a fistful of mud and a smirk that still lived somewhere deep in my spine. The house hadn't changed. Same sagging porch, same flaking paint, but the air around it felt smaller now, like the walls had learned to hold secrets instead of warmth. I parked the Tesla in front of Daniel's pickup. Old, dented, a patchwork of primer and pride. The silver gleam of my car reflected in his windshield, and for a moment, I saw the whole story. The girl who left in shame returning as the woman they never expected to see again. The front door opened before I reached it. Daniel's wife, Carolyn, forced a smile that didn't reach her eyes. Maggie, you made it. Daniel's inside. The smell of coffee and dust hit me as I stepped in. The living room looked exactly as it had 25 years ago, except for the photographs. Every wall was a shrine to Daniel, his wedding, his children, his so-called ventures. Not a single picture of me. Hey, sis, Daniel said, standing near the old oak table. You look successful. I am, I said simply, setting my umbrella by the door. We went through the motions. A hug too brief to mean anything, polite comments about the weather, coffee poured into chipped mugs that hadn't been washed properly. Emily appeared from the kitchen, pale and quiet. Hi, Aunt Maggie, she murmured, eyes darting away. I almost smiled. She looked so much like the little girl who used to draw next to me on the porch steps. But something in her gaze told me she already knew why I was here. Daniel sat down, gesturing to the chair across from him. Let's talk business, he said. It's not just for us, Maggie. It's for family, for Dad's legacy. There it was. The word that used to keep me tethered to people who never showed up for me. Family. I let him talk. About the market. About opportunity. About rebuilding what Dad started. He said they just needed a little help. $180,000 to get things rolling. Carolyn nodded dutifully beside him, her hand clutching his arm like an anchor. When he finally stopped, I reached into my leather portfolio and placed a folder on the table. I spoke quietly. Let me show you something. He blinked, confused. I slid the first document toward him, a copy of the inheritance transfer from the year our father died. His signature. My exclusion. Next. A printout of public property records showing Daniel had sold the land in 2001 for $420,000. You told Mom you held onto it for the family, I said, my voice even. You sold it and pocketed everything. Color rose in his face. That's not... I cut him off with the next sheet. Bank wires totaling $2,500, payments I'd made toward Emily's college tuition. When she needed help, I gave it, I said. No strings, no guilt. The room went still. Even the rain outside seemed to pause. I built everything you see without a penny from this family, I said, my voice steady but low. You built debt. Daniel's chair scraped back against the floor. You think you're better than us? He shouted, slamming his palm on the table hard enough to rattle the mugs. I stood slowly, smoothing my jacket. No, I said. Just separate. His eyes narrowed. You came here to gloat? To throw money in our faces? I smiled faintly. No. To return the favor. From the folder I took one last sheet, glossy, printed, elegant. The press release. The Holt Women's Initiative. A $250,000 annual fund for women in architecture, I said. First scholarships go out next spring. He blinked, confused. You named it after me? No, I said. After Mom's maiden name. The women who were never allowed to sign their own checks. The color drained from his face. Carolyn covered her mouth. Emily looked between us, trembling. This opportunity, I said quietly, has passed. I gathered my folder, the old fountain pen slipping easily into my pocket. It felt heavier now, or maybe I finally understood what it was meant to do. Emily's voice broke through the silence. "Aunt Maggie, please. I didn't mean to." I turned to her, gentler than I expected. "You needed to show up, sweetheart. Not for me. For yourself." The rain outside had turned violent, pounding against the roof like applause for a truth too long buried. Daniel stood frozen, fists clenched, his mouth twisting between anger and disbelief. Carolyn began to cry quietly, muttering, "We just wanted a chance." "There were plenty of chances," I said. "You spent them." As I walked toward the door, Daniel's voice followed me. "You'll regret this, Maggie. Family is all you have." I paused in the doorway, the storm wind whipping my hair across my face. "No," I said, turning back. "Family is what you build, not what drains you." The screen door slammed behind me, the sound sharp and final. The Tesla lights flickered on as I approached, raindrops streaking across the hood like silver veins. Through the window, I could still see them, silhouettes of the past, trapped in a house built on entitlement. I slid into the driver's seat, wiped the fog from the glass, and started the car. The storm roared. The tires crunched against the gravel, and for the first time in years, I didn't feel small driving away from that house. I wasn't leaving anymore. I was done being the one who stayed quiet. Her phone lit up before sunrise, a relentless glow cutting through the soft light of her bedroom. Missed calls. 17 voicemails. The first few were Daniel shouting, then his wife crying, then Emily apologizing between sobs. By the 10th, Maggie had stopped listening. She let them pile up like ghosts at the door, familiar voices she no longer owed answers to. She sat at her kitchen island, sipping coffee from a handmade ceramic mug, the city skyline glinting through the floor-to-ceiling windows. Her Tesla charged quietly in the driveway. The silence was earned, and she wasn't giving it back. Then the ping came. Facebook, Daniel Holt. Some people forget where they came from. She stared at it for a second, a half smile tugging at her lips. It was predictable, his version of damage control. But what he didn't expect was what came next. Dozens of comments flooded in. Proud of Maggie for standing on her own 2 feet. Funny, didn't she pay for your daughter's tuition? Some people forget who helped them stay where they are. By noon, Daniel's post had been deleted, but the internet had already picked its side. A week later, the Denver Business Review ran a feature, Architect Maggie Holt Turns Pain into Empowerment. From family rejection to philanthropy, Holt's new initiative is redefining mentorship for women in design. The article showed her standing outside her firm, tall, elegant, confident, framed by the clean geometry of the building she'd designed herself. Her quote anchored the piece. "Healing isn't about proving anyone wrong. It's about proving yourself right." That morning, as she read the article, her assistant Gina walked in holding 2 coffees. "You've officially broken the internet," she said, grinning. Maggie laughed softly. "I didn't mean to." "Yeah, well," Gina said, setting 1 cup down. "Sometimes truth just travels fast, but peace never comes without an echo." 2 weeks later, Daniel's construction company defaulted on a major project. Unpaid loans, back taxes, angry clients. A foreclosure notice went up on his office door. Local gossip spread like wildfire. Bad management. Too much debt. Didn't he have a sister who's killing it in architecture? By the time he tried to call Maggie again, her attorney had already sent the letter. Subject: Notice of no further contact. Summary: all communication from Daniel or associated parties must cease immediately. Her signature at the bottom looked calm, almost graceful. She didn't need anger, just boundaries. Still, even freedom has a strange emptiness to it. The following Thursday, Maggie sat across from her therapist, a soft-spoken woman with silver hair and a kind smile. The office smelled of chamomile and books. "You finally drew the line?" the therapist said gently. "How does it feel?" Maggie thought for a long moment before answering. "Like something I should have done 20 years ago," she said. "But also, like I buried part of myself with it." The therapist nodded. "Boundaries aren't walls, Maggie. They're doors that you get to lock and unlock when you choose." Maggie smiled faintly. "You know what's strange? I don't hate them. Not anymore, I just don't want them near me. That's not cold, her therapist said. That's clarity. For the first time in her life, Maggie didn't feel like she owed her pain an audience. That night, she hosted a dinner at her home, a mix of colleagues, friends, and the small circle she now called family. Gina brought wine, laughter filled the air, and someone queued up a jazz playlist that made everything feel easy. The dining room glowed under warm pendant lights. Plates of grilled salmon, roasted vegetables, and artisan bread lined the table. Conversation flowed, real, unforced, safe. Halfway through, Gina lifted her glass. To peace, she said, her voice carrying over the hum of laughter. And people who deserve your energy. Everyone raised their glasses. Maggie did too. To peace, she echoed, and to never mistaking guilt for love again. A quiet murmur of agreement followed. For a moment, she caught her reflection in the window. The faint outline of the woman she used to be, standing in the shadows of others. She smiled at her. After the guests left and the candles burned low, Maggie stepped out onto her balcony. The city stretched beneath her, lights shimmering like promises kept. Her phone buzzed once more. A new message, Emily. I understand now. I hope someday we can talk. Maggie didn't reply. She didn't delete it either. She just let it sit. A seed, maybe, for another season. The wind picked up, cool and clean, carrying the faint sound of music from a neighboring rooftop. She closed her eyes and breathed in the night. For the first time in decades, the silence wasn't punishment. It was peace. A year can turn a wound into wisdom, if you let it. The auditorium buzzed with nervous excitement. Cameras flashed, local reporters shuffled papers, and a small banner hung over the stage. The Holt Women's Initiative, annual scholarship ceremony. Maggie stood behind the podium, a soft smile on her face as she looked out at the crowd. Architects, students, community leaders. She'd been to hundreds of ceremonies, but this one felt different. This one carried her father's pen in her hand, the same one that once signed her first freelance contract, her first lease, her first act of freedom. Now, it would sign something far more important. The scholarship recipient was announced. A quiet, wide-eyed girl named Leah Morales from Daniel's old high school. She walked up, clutching her speech in trembling hands. Leah looked at Maggie as she accepted the check. $50,000 that would change her life. You made me believe women like us can build something too, she said softly, voice cracking halfway through. Maggie smiled, steady and warm. You already are, she said, handing her the fountain pen. Now sign your own beginning. Applause filled the hall, echoing against the tall glass walls. Cameras clicked, but Maggie's eyes stayed on Leah, the reflection of her younger self in a world that finally had room for her. Later, outside the venue, she lingered near the steps, taking in the spring sunlight. It was the same light that used to pour over the old farmhouse fields, except now, it didn't burn. It healed. A familiar voice broke through the crowd. Aunt Maggie? She turned. Emily stood a few feet away, holding a small coffee cup, her posture smaller, her eyes softer. Gone was the glossy veneer of a girl raised in comfort. She looked human. I wasn't sure you'd want to see me, Emily said. I wasn't sure either, Maggie replied, her tone even. There was an awkward pause before Emily spoke again. I'm sorry, she said, voice trembling. I didn't know the whole story, about the inheritance, about Dad, any of it. I just thought... Maggie stopped her with a gentle nod. You do now. Emily swallowed hard, tears threatening. You really don't hate us? Hate wastes too much time, Maggie said quietly. Take care of yourself, Em. That's all any of us can do. Emily nodded, eyes glistening. She wanted to say more, but Maggie turned before she could. Not out of cruelty, but out of peace. Some doors, once closed, don't need to be slammed. They just stay shut. The cafe behind them hummed with life. Laughter, the hiss of espresso, the ordinary music of people moving on. Maggie slipped her sunglasses on. the corners of her mouth curving into the faintest smile. As she walked back to her car, her phone buzzed with notifications. Praise for the foundation, articles celebrating the scholarship, messages from young women who said her story inspired them. She skimmed one, a simple line that made her pause. "Thank you for showing that you can lose everything and still build something beautiful." That night, she drove out to the edge of the new housing project her firm had designed, sustainable homes for single mothers and young women starting over. The air smelled of fresh soil and cedar. A few workers lingered, planting the first saplings along the perimeter. Maggie joined them. She knelt in the dirt, her manicured hands pressing soil around a young maple tree. Her fountain pen rested in her breast pocket, glinting in the fading light. As she straightened, wiping her hands on her jeans, she looked at the row of tiny trees, fragile but certain. Roots starting where none existed before. Her voice, low and sure, carried in the wind. "I used to chase family," she said, almost to herself. "Now I build it." The sun dipped behind the hills, painting the sky in soft gold and rust, and for the first time, Maggie didn't feel like the outsider looking in. She felt like the foundation itself, solid, unshaken, and entirely her own.